student betrayed into marrying old millionaire, a brilliant student married an 87-year-old billionaire for money. But the real price was his life. Locke stands frozen in the mansion's conservatory during his wedding ceremony to 87-year-old Cornelius Blackthorne. The handful of witnesses watch as this brilliant 23-year-old finance prodigy kisses his elderly husband's corpse-like lips. His hands shake visibly as he signs the marriage certificate. What they didn't know was that Locke had just signed his own death warrant. If this already has you questioning everything, leave a comment below, because this story gets much darker. Lachlan Locke. Westbrook stood frozen in the Gothic mansion's conservatory, his hands trembling as he held the marriage certificate. At 23, this finance prodigy from Whitmore University had Wall Street firms fighting over him. His thesis was being called revolutionary. His future seemed golden. So why did signing his name feel like writing his own obituary? The conservatory reeked of exotic orchids, their sweet, cloying scent making him dizzy. His perfectly tailored ash-gray suit, custom-made for this moment, felt like a costume, like he was playing a role in someone else's twisted theater. Have you ever made a decision that seemed perfect but felt completely wrong? That gnawing sensation in your gut when everything looks right on paper, but your instincts are screaming danger? Cornelius Blackthorne wheezed beside him, all 87 years of decay, wrapped in an expensive tuxedo. The old man's papery lips had just brushed Locke's cheek, a kiss that lasted exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds that would haunt him forever. The handful of witnesses barely looked up from their pocket watches. Ancient men in expensive suits who seemed more interested in when this ceremony would end than what it actually meant. Only one person watched with genuine intensity. Savannah Delacourt sat in the front row, her pink-highlighted hair catching the afternoon light. Those calculating green eyes never left Locke's face. For 3 months, she'd been his everything, his girlfriend, his confidant, his guide into this world of wealth and opportunity. But right now, watching him seal this deal, her expression was unreadable. Locke thought he was securing his future. Instead, he was walking into a trap 60 years in the making. The minister's voice echoed through the glass walls. "You may now kiss your husband." Blackthorne's grip on his ornate walking stick tightened as he leaned closer. His breath smelled like expensive wine and something else, something that reminded Locke of funeral flowers. "Welcome to the family, boy," the old man whispered, his voice carrying notes of satisfaction that made Locke's right eyebrow twitch, a nervous habit he'd never been able to control. What they didn't know was that Locke had just signed his own death warrant. The contract was simple: marriage in exchange for inheritance. Billions of dollars waiting for him when the old man died. And at 87, with a weak heart and failing health, that couldn't be far off, right? If this already has you questioning everything, hit that like button, because this story gets much darker. What would you do if you discovered your new spouse collected more than just art? 3 months earlier, Savannah Delacourt had been a vision in fuchsia slipping into Locke's advanced portfolio management seminar 5 minutes late. Every head turned when she entered, but her laser focus locked onto one target. The brilliant, lonely student in the third row who'd already caught Professor's attention with his revolutionary financial theories. "Mind if I sit here?" she'd whispered, her voice carrying just enough breathiness to seem innocent. For 3 months, she wove herself into his world with surgical precision. She appeared at his favorite coffee shop. What a coincidence! She needed help with assignments and subjects she was secretly acing. She traced patterns on his chest during late-night study sessions, whispering exactly what he needed to hear. "You're going to change the world, Locke. Someone with your mind deserves everything: wealth, power, recognition." But Savannah wasn't working alone. Cornelius Blackthorne had spent 60 years perfecting his craft. The Gothic mansion that swallowed the surrounding landscape wasn't just his home, it was his hunting ground. When he moved through marble halls lined with stern-faced portraits, each step of his walking stick echoed with the weight of dark secrets. His eyes, sharp as winter steel despite his failing body, had been studying Locke long before that first chance meeting with Savannah. "Miss Delacourt tells me you're quite the financial prodigy." Blackthorn had rasped during their first encounter. "I've built my fortune on recognizing potential. Perhaps we should discuss arrangements." The arrangement was marriage. Blackthorn needed a young, intelligent heir to legitimize his empire. Locke would inherit billions when the old man died. "It's just a business transaction," Savannah assured him on his apartment balcony, her arms wrapped around his neck. "He needs legitimacy, you need security." And afterward, she let the promise hang in the air like expensive perfume. They worked together flawlessly. Savannah isolated him from friends and family. "You're so focused here, maybe it would be better if you simplified your relationships." Staff members at the mansion would stop talking when Locke approached, their eyes filled with what looked suspiciously like pity. Certain rooms remained locked, their keys mysteriously absent from even the master ring Blackthorn provided. Comment below if you've ever felt like someone was playing games with your emotions. The trap was closing, and Locke never saw it coming. Before Savannah entered his life, Locke lived in quiet solitude. His brilliance had always set him apart. While other students struggled with basic concepts, Locke absorbed complex financial theories like a sponge. His thesis on portfolio optimization was earning whispers of revolutionary from professors who'd seen decades of brilliant minds pass through their halls. But genius came with a price: isolation. He spent most evenings alone in his apartment, surrounded by textbooks and computer screens displaying market algorithms only he seemed to understand. His nervous habit of eyebrow twitching happened most often during presentations, when professors asked questions that revealed just how far ahead of his peers he really was. Wall Street's most prestigious firms were already circling, offering internships that could fast-track him to wealth and success. Everything seemed to be falling into place. Then Savannah appeared, and suddenly he wasn't alone anymore. Her interest felt genuine. When she asked about his research, her eyes lit up with what seemed like real fascination. When she suggested meeting Blackthorn, it felt like an opportunity, not a trap. "You deserve recognition for your brilliance," she would say, running her fingers through his hair. "Someone like you shouldn't have to wait years to build wealth." Locke's analytical mind screamed warnings. The situation felt too perfect, too convenient. But his heart, that foolish organ that had been starved of genuine connection, overruled every logical objection. He wanted to believe in Savannah's vision of their future together. During his weeks at the Blackthorn mansion, Locke inadvertently became an expert on the building itself. Unable to sleep in the unfamiliar environment, he wandered the halls at night, studying architectural details, memorizing the layout, noting which floorboards creaked and which corridors echoed. His natural curiosity mapped every service entrance, every hidden passage mentioned in renovation documents he'd found in the library. This knowledge seemed useless at the time, just the obsessive behavior of an analytical mind with too much time on its hands. Locke's brilliant intellect had made him a target, but it would also become his weapon. 3 weeks into his new life as Cornelius Blackthorn's husband, Locke discovered the truth. He'd been exploring the mansion's upper floors, driven by restlessness that had been growing daily, when he noticed something odd. A door that didn't appear on any of the architectural plans he'd studied obsessively during his sleepless nights. The handle turned easily. Behind it lay a narrow staircase leading to a circular room tucked beneath the mansion's highest tower. What Locke found there would shatter everything he thought he knew about his new family. The study was a monument to methodical evil. Every wall was covered with photographs. Dozens upon dozens of young men. They all shared certain characteristics that made Locke's blood run cold. Intelligence burning in their eyes. Athletic builds. Classical good looks. The kind of faces that photographed well and inspired trust. Each photo was meticulously labeled with dates, names, and personality assessments written in Blackthorn's spidery handwriting. Marcus Holloway, 24, economics PhD, married June 15, 2019. Disappeared August 3, 2019. Devin Sterling, 22, MIT graduate, married April 2, 2020. Last seen May 18, 2020. Rafael Montenegro, 25, Harvard Business School. Married September 12, 2021. Vanished October 1st, 2021. The pattern was horrifyingly clear. Each young man had been brilliant, ambitious, trusting. Each had married Cornelius Blackthorne, and each had disappeared within months of the ceremony. Their photos marked with red X's and final dates written in what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Locke's hands trembled as he found his own photograph at the center of the wall, a candid shot taken during his first visit to the mansion. His face was unmarked, but beneath it, in Blackthorne's distinctive handwriting, was tomorrow's date. Tomorrow. The room seemed to spin around him as the full scope of his situation became clear. This wasn't about inheritance or business arrangements. This was about collection. Blackthorne didn't just want Locke's signature on a marriage certificate. He wanted his life, his research, his very existence to add to this gallery of victims. 17 young men had stood exactly where Locke stood now. 17 brilliant minds had trusted exactly the wrong people. And 17 families were probably still wondering what had happened to their sons, brothers, boyfriends. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway below, Blackthorne's distinctive shuffle accompanied by heavier boots that could only belong to hired muscle. They knew he'd found the room. Pause the video and tell me, what would be your first move if you found that room? Locke had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached the study. Maybe 15 if he was lucky. His analytical mind, the same intellect that had made him a target, now crystallized into sharp focus. The hunt was about to begin. I was wondering when you'd find this room. Locke spun around to find Savannah standing in the doorway. Gone was her trademark fuchsia wardrobe. Now she wore black like a mourner at a funeral that hadn't happened yet. Her calculating smirk had vanished, replaced by something far more chilling: professional detachment. Savannah, what is this? What happened to these men? She stepped into the room with movements that were graceful and predatory. They served their purpose, just as you're about to serve yours. The truth hit him like cold water. Savannah wasn't Blackthorne's accomplice. She was his granddaughter, raised from childhood to be the perfect recruiter. The old man's fortune wasn't built on legitimate investments alone, but on decades of systematic murder disguised as insurance fraud. Young, brilliant men would be carefully selected, married to Blackthorne to make them beneficiaries, then eliminated before they could inherit or become suspicious. You see, Locke, grandfather, doesn't just collect art or rare books. He collects lives. Each husband provides insurance payouts and access to their academic work, their innovations, their potential. You've already signed over your thesis research, those revolutionary financial theories you're so proud of. They'll make us millions. The footsteps in the hallway grew louder. Blackthorne's voice crackled through a handheld radio. He's still in the building. Check the servants' quarters again. Locke's mind raced through possibilities. His 3 months of sleepless wandering through the mansion suddenly became invaluable intelligence. Service corridors, hidden passages, emergency exits installed during 1940s renovations. Using his phone, he photographed the wall of victims and grabbed Blackthorne's leather journal from the desk. The same brilliant intellect that made him a target was about to become his weapon. What happened next would either save Locke's life or seal his fate forever. 2 ex-military contractors named Briggs and Kozlov systematically searched every room while Blackthorne coordinated from his wheelchair with the precision of someone who'd done this many times before. For 6 hours, Locke moved through the mansion like a ghost. His obsessive study of architectural plans during sleepless nights now became his salvation. Forgotten passages between walls, service elevators that bypassed main floors, blind spots in corridors where ancient portraits created shadows. Every creaking floorboard he'd memorized during restless wandering now served as an early warning system. In the kitchen pantry, hiding behind industrial-sized flour sacks, he overheard a conversation that made his blood freeze. "What about the girl?" Briggs asked. "Savannah has already moved on to the next target," Blackthorne replied through the radio. "A promising young woman at Stanford studying biochemistry. Fresh, brilliant, and utterly trusting. Another victim. Another brilliant mind about to be trapped in this web of calculated murder. That's when Locke realized running would only save his own life. It wouldn't stop the machine that had been claiming victims for decades. The evidence he'd gathered would be dismissed as the ravings of a disturbed young man. After all, who would believe such an outrageous story without undeniable proof? He needed to force their hand, make them reveal themselves in a way that couldn't be denied or covered up. Using the mansion's landline, Locke called the local police, the FBI, and 3 major news outlets, claiming to have evidence of multiple murders at the Blackthorn estate. Then he triggered the mansion's fire alarm system, ensuring emergency responders would arrive quickly and in force. Finally, he returned to the study and waited. Blackthorn arrived first, moving faster than his age should have allowed, fury blazing in his ancient eyes. Behind him came Savannah, no longer bothering to maintain her innocent facade. She carried a syringe filled with something that definitely wasn't medicine. "You clever boy," Blackthorn wheezed, his walking stick tapping against the floor with sharp, angry strikes. But cleverness without wisdom is just elaborate suicide. "The authorities are already on their way," Locke said, backing toward the study's single window. "They'll find this room, these photographs, your journal. It's over." Savannah laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You think we haven't prepared for this? Grandfather has been cleaning up messes for 60 years. That's when Locke played his final card. "I live-streamed everything to social media. Thousands of people watched me discover this room. They saw the photographs, heard your confession." For the first time since he'd known her, Savannah looked uncertain. The lie worked perfectly. Blackthorn's face went pale, his hands shaking as he gripped his walking stick. Even Savannah's professional composure cracked as she realized the implications. The sound of sirens grew louder in the distance. "Even if you kill me now," Locke continued, "the truth is already out there. 17 families are about to get answers they've been waiting years to hear." What followed made international headlines. Cornelius Blackthorn died of a massive heart attack during his arrest, clutching his chest as federal agents read him his rights. He took many of his darkest secrets to the grave, but the evidence in his study told the story clearly enough. Savannah Delacourt was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. During her trial, her testimony revealed the locations of 17 bodies buried throughout the mansion's extensive grounds. Each grave corresponded to a photograph on Blackthorn's wall of victims. The insurance companies involved paid out massive settlements to the families, money that could never restore their lost sons, but provided some measure of justice after years of unanswered questions. Several corrupt officials who had helped cover up the disappearances were prosecuted and convicted. The network of enablers that had allowed this horror to continue for decades was systematically dismantled. But perhaps the most important outcome was Dr. Miranda Voss, the biochemistry student at Stanford who had been Savannah's next target. Warned by the massive publicity surrounding the case, she was able to identify and report suspicious approaches from individuals connected to similar schemes. The ripple effects saved lives that would have been lost. Justice had been served, but at what cost? 17 brilliant young men had died because they trusted the wrong people. 17 families had suffered years of not knowing what happened to their loved ones. Was Locke a hero for exposing the truth? Or was he simply lucky enough to be victim number 18 who managed to escape? Locke testified at Savannah's trial, his academic credentials and compelling story making him a credible witness. The courtroom was packed with family members of the victims, people who finally had answers after years of devastating uncertainty. He never wore gray again. Returning to academia, Locke shifted his focus from pure finance to forensic accounting and fraud detection. His experience had taught him that brilliance without wisdom was dangerous, but wisdom earned through surviving betrayal could become a powerful force for protecting others. The nervous habit of his right eyebrow twitching became something he never ignored again. That instinctive warning system had tried to save him from the very beginning, but he'd been too desperate for connection to listen. Some lessons he learned were worth remembering for a lifetime. His research now focused on identifying financial patterns that indicated fraud schemes targeting vulnerable populations. He worked with law enforcement agencies to train investigators in recognizing the signs of elaborate long-term cons. The mansion was demolished 6 months after the trial. The Blackthorn fortune, built on decades of theft and murder, was distributed among victims' families and charitable organizations focused on fraud prevention. Locke never married again, not because he couldn't trust, but because he learned the difference between genuine connection and calculated manipulation. The question that haunted him wasn't whether justice had been served. It was simpler and more disturbing. How many other Cornelius Blackthorns were out there, collecting brilliant minds like trophies? What red flags would you have noticed that Locke missed? Do you think Savannah deserved life in prison? Or was she a victim of her upbringing? Have you ever ignored warning signs because you wanted something to be true? If this story taught you something about trusting your instincts, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more true crime stories that reveal the dark side of human nature.